because the FCC asked me to make a kind of double-barrel introduction before we engage a discussion about AFP and post-truth. And the title of this double-barrel intro is Opening an AFP Bureau in Pyongyang whilst Tackling the New Post-Truth World. Actually, on the website of the FCC, it's changed a little bit, but we stick on this one, fact-checking, so I prefer this one than that. It's an interesting punchline, because in both cases of North Korea and if you take Donald Trump, I mean, it's a real challenge for us, as you can imagine, for a news organization like us to, how to deal with propaganda and lies. You will tell me it's not a new thing. We have been used to that, and some of you here have the long experience also with China and other difficult countries to work with. So, I mean, it's not a new thing. But in the Twitter and Facebook era, our task is obviously much more complicated, especially at a time when citizens don't trust the press. And this is a very important point, I guess. Of course, there is a big difference between Trump and Kim Jong-un. The first one is a Twitter maniac and considers the press as an enemy. And in the other case, Kim had the absolute control over the press and propaganda in his country. But at the end of the day, their goals are quite similar, because what matters is not what is true, but what people will believe. I imagine that most of us, we've drawn some lessons from what we call the media failure after Brexit and Trump, just to summarize. There was the debate at AFP as well, of course. Did we do well? What did we miss? Why we didn't predict, or why our angles were so far from the reality? Definitely there has been a disconnection between what we write and what people think, and we must not forget that. So a big debate, and at the end of the day, I think we don't have to go very too far in some autocriticism. I don't think, generally speaking, the press has done such a bad job. But what happened forced us to go back to some fundamentals of journalism. It may be very simple and very obvious for most of us here, but I think it's very important, because we missed something. And again, we have to go back to some basic principle of journalism. Give the facts first. This is very important. Avoid commentaries, and if you have to comment or editorialize, be modest. And frankly speaking, I don't think we are very modest when we comment and editorialize. We are very often pretentious, pompous, I would say, and we are not intellectual. We are journalists, I'm sorry. You have intellectuals, you have philosophers, you have people, you have experts, people who have time to think. We have less and less time to think and to do deep analysis. And sometimes, I think we should be more modest and stick to the facts. Go to the field, be a reporter, meaning report and tell stories, real stories. Talk to people, various people, especially those you disagree with. This is also a key point that I think probably we missed a little bit in the case of Brexit and Trump. Assume that everything is possible and not only what you think is possible. This assumption has to be the rule number one for the coming election in France, And I mean, the rule we have at AFP for this French election is everything can happen. Everything. From far right to far left, everything can happen. We have no clue. So we have to assume that and work from that point. Use the polls very carefully. I think we very often jump on polls too easily, and very often the polls is making the story. Or the story shouldn't be the poll. The poll is just an indication, not a story for us. So I have to put my glasses on. So back to fundamentals. Last year, and thanks to Eric Wishart here, so we published at AFP a guide of ethics sources guidelines. It was quite important because it goes back to the fundamentals again. I must say that journalists today, in the world we are living, with social network and television everywhere, is a kind of big circus. And in too many cases, it's no more the news first, but the ego first, our ego, right? And for many of us, what's important is not what we write, but where it is published. How many likes I get? Did I make the buzz with my tweet? How many times did I appear on a TV show to be interviewed by a fellow colleague that will interview next week? This is a kind of, what I call the circus. And of course, we are not all like that, but I think generally speaking, we forget that we are journalists. And we are part of, of kind of like, we're acting like actors. And I don't think it's very good, especially, again, at a time where citizens don't trust the press less and less. And we don't give a good example of that. So it's urgent to go back to the main reason why we're doing this job. It would be a bit provocative, maybe, but maybe the way we cover China or the way we cover Hong Kong, maybe are we going on the ground, on the field enough? Do we talk to the real people? Do we spend enough time to go to the other side of the border or even in the new territories here? That's a question. Maybe we can make some efforts. So what the post-truth world is also telling us is that basically we cannot be lazy anymore. And again, I'm very provocative, but I think that in the past years, we journalists, our community, we have been a bit lazy, probably, or very, very busy because of what happened on Twitter and Facebook. We have to verify, and we have to spend a lot of time on the web. And we sacrifice probably, again, what should be our job. So we shouldn't be lazy. It's not good, but it's not enough, of course. And we have to address seriously the question of fake news, alternative news, and hoax very seriously. So, as for AFP is concerned, we recently joined the First Draft Coalition. I guess most of you here know what is this First Draft Coalition, backed by Google. We can talk about it later. Basically, it's 80 media and institutions and some association organizations who joined this coalition to try to trace fakes and manipulation. It's mainly US and European media, mainly some Arab media as well, like Al Jazeera and others. Very few Asian media has joined this coalition, except some 3 or 4 media from Philippines, and we can understand why with what happened there with Tudor-T. But of course, there is no Japanese media so far, unless I'm wrong. No Chinese media at all, and of course. So we joined this coalition, and for the coming French election, we're taking part in a project which is called Cross-Check, with 10 other French media. Basically, this is aiming at boosting identification and verification of online content, including photos and videos. So 6 journalists has been hired in Paris by First Draft, full-time. They will scan what's happened on the social network. They will identify hoax, fake news, manipulation of photos. They will share their report on a private platform shared with the 10 partners. And every time there is an important fake or manipulation, AFP will write a blog post that will be published on the social network, on First Draft platform, and on all the social network of the media partners. We will also test another thing with Facebook for the French election. Also, it's based on the text that where Facebook will flag also the fakes. Of course, we can debate. Why Google and Facebook are doing that, of course, and we're not naive. But I think it's quite interesting, and I think this is a way also that we have to counterattack, all the people, all the politicians who are using Twitters and Facebook for spreading fake news. So fact checking is definitely important, a necessity. It's also very time consuming. And again, the danger would be that journalists will be fact checkers, mainly fact checkers. As I said, we already spend so many hours per day in tweeting, in checking what's happening on the web, And so if we add the fact checking, that's very time consuming, and we shouldn't consider that because we did a good fact checking that we have done the job, and the job is done. It was a fake news. I did fact check. I did my job. No. We would be wrong. That's not what we are asking. At least not in our organization. And the other question with how do we answer, how do we respond to the fake news? I think we have to be very, very careful in the way we answer that. We address the fake news. We can't be wrong. This is silly to say that, but we can't be wrong. Sometimes we don't explain very well why the news is fake. And if you look at what happened a couple of days ago with Trump saying, see what happened last night in Sweden. He was referring to a Fox News story about migrants in Sweden. And for Trump, what's happened last night was Fox News, was not what happened. You know? And he was referring to a couple of terrorist attacks that happened in Brussels, Nice, and Paris. And immediately, everybody jumped on that and said, he said there was a terrorist attack in Sweden. But actually, he didn't exactly say that. So, I mean, we have to be very careful also. And the way the former Swedish Prime Minister answered, Carl Bildt, don't think it's the right way. He made a joke and he said, about Trump, we can make that joke as well, I guess. What has he been smoking? Sure. Well, we can say that, but I don't think this is the right way, at least for us, for journalists, to answer this kind of fake news. You know, I mean, we have to be serious. We can't take that as a joke because this has made the buzz. What has been smoking? It was a buzz, but it did not answer very well, I guess, the issue. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, on Monday, AFP was seriously attacked in France by Mr. Philippe, who is a far right. He's the lieutenant of Marine Le Pen. He's the number 2 of the far right party. We were attacked by him, and we were attacked by the far left candidate, Mélenchon. And both of them used the word fake news, because we published a graphic of the 5 main proposals of Marine Le Pen for the election. We did that for all the candidates. And of course, it's the 5 main points. It's not exhaustive, right? So Philippe said it's fake news, because not everything was in the graph. You know? So he said fake news. A couple of minutes later, we had a story about maritime economy, sea economy, and an NGO was complaining that none of the candidates was talking about ecology, sea, maritime, blah 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 blah. So we had a quote in the story about that, and this guy Mélenchon, his candidate, the presidential, said, "Oh, no candidate is interested in maritime. Sorry, that's a fake news. This is AFP. This is and again, the more and more people in France are doing the same as Trump is doing in the US, talking about fake news every time we publish something which is not exactly what they would like to be. So it will be, I mean, this campaign in France, it will be very, very challenging. So what we do, of course, we have to put more and more people in doing fact-checking, in checking all the UGC content. We put more resources on that. We try also to make more popular. We have a blog called Correspondent, who is the making of the news, try to explain to the public how we make a photo, how we shoot a photo, how we write an article, what condition was that, to explain also how the news is made, because it's not fake, it's real. And of course, we have and we do consolidate the network because we are expanding, and I think that having a strong network for media, for international news organization as AFP, is one of the best answers we can give to fight the fake, because the more people you have on the ground, the more people you report the facts and quality stories, And so, of course, you have to put more people, fact-checkers, UGC content. This is important, but you have to put more people on the ground as well. And we are creating positions. We are opening bureaus. We'll talk in a minute about the Pyongyang bureau, which is another challenge. But we are betting on the fact that the more journalists we have on the ground, the better it is to fight the fake news. And another point also, it will be the end of my introduction, about diversity. I think in most of the organizations, maybe the diversity is not enough. I mean, we always say at AFP, and we are very proud of that we have 80 nationalities working at AFP. I think it's very important to have more people, more diverse people. Which is true, but I think we still have an effort to make, including inside AFP, including at some quite important posts in editing. I think the more we will promote diverse people from different culture, the better will be the quality journalism we are trying to do in a world again which is very, very disrupted. Thank you very much for this, for listening to me. I hope I've been rather clear and speak a bit too fast, as usual. And now Giles will give you a couple of clues about the North Korean thing. Thank you.
Right, hi. I took up my current job in Hong Kong in January the 1st, and for the 4 years before that, I was in South Korea. When the correspondents, the foreign press in South Korea sort of meet up, as we did regularly, we would sometimes compare exactly what the dominant news stories were. And until very recently, when there's been a big story in South Korea, there are essentially only two stories in South Korea that dominate all news. There's Samsung Electronics, and there's North Korea. And North Korea really, I would say, was 70%, 70 or 80% of all the coverage that we did during my 4 years there. So, which is an odd sort of situation to be in. You're in one country and you're covering another one that you can't go to. In some ways, maybe it's not dissimilar to the China watchers in the 60s and 70s who were basically covering mainland China, I guess, from Hong Kong, and doing similar things to what we were doing in Seoul, because the way we covered North Korea was passing dense state media KCNA copy, which is tough to read at the best of times, but try to find something inside it that was interesting, new, or otherwise. We could talk to defectors who had come from the north and come to South Korea, a lot of them with very strong agendas of their own. And it wasn't just trying to work our way around the North Korean propaganda. I think one of the other really tough things we had to do was verify or pass judgment on the amount of ridiculous stories that were written about North Korea and gained a lot of traction in the Western media. So did Kim Jong-un really eat, 2 kilos of Emmental every day, as the Daily Mirror said he did? Did he really throw his uncle to a pack of starving dogs as a method of execution? That was traced back to some Chinese satirical website. But these were stories that were very, very strongly picked up at the time by mainstream media, and we were being asked by our editing desk quite correctly, what do you know about this? And the answer, of course, was absolutely nothing, because no one knows. So it's an incredibly tough country to cover in that way. My predecessor, I arrived there in 2008. My predecessor had been there for 6 years. He went to North Korea once. He applied many, many times, but simply wasn't allowed to go there. Not because of something to do with him, but just that they weren't giving any access at that time. For me, it was a little bit, I was lucky in the sense that I went there 3 times in 3 years. Each time was for an invited group of foreign media. This is a big group. I mean, when they invite people, they invite about 150 people to turn up, mainly TV broadcasters, because they want images of these huge parades that they're going to put on from time to time for their big anniversaries. And we'd go on these trips, and it was a circus. You would arrive at the airport. The second we get out to the airport, every single photographer, every single cameraman is already just flicking pictures, getting footage of anything that moves. On the bus, traveling from the airport into the city, I saw 3 American broadcasters do stand-ups in the bus. They're standing there going, here I am, I'm in Pyongyang, I'm going down a road. There really wasn't much to say about it, but I'm here. And that was all that they were really saying. I am here, I am here, I am here. They were taking photographs. There's a dog in Pyongyang. There's a tree over there. Let's take the tree. And it was sort of like, it was desperate. The tree and the dog together, yes, exactly. Actually, there weren't that many dogs. But, so that was, another stereotype we have to get rid of. But there was, where was I? Yeah. So it was desperate. And I think where we were, I think we all had that image. What the benefit, obviously, of the bureau that we opened was this, that we were, because when we go in these big groups with 100 people, 150 people, you are in a hotel on an island. It's a place called Yanggakdo, and it's a special hotel that is used for these special events. All the journalists are in there. It's an island. You can't get off it. It's in the river, the Pyongyang River. And you would be put on a bus. You would be taken to whatever venue they were going to take you to that day. You weren't allowed, although people did, you weren't allowed to take photos out of the bus. You get off the bus, you go to the venue, you don't speak to anybody. You come back, you get on the bus, and you're back in the hotel in the evening, and then you're allowed to file whatever you managed to get hold of during that time. That would include going to a flower festival, maybe, if you were lucky. There would always be the big event. There would be the main military parade, which is news, because they would show off their new missiles, and perhaps there was something there that nobody had seen before, a new type of missile. So there was genuinely news to be had. But in terms of any sense of being allowed to talk, you never spoke to a North Korean, apart from the official minder who would be with you at all times. Each group had their own minder, and they were paranoid because they were terribly responsible for you. If you went off and started to try and find your way around, to wander around, they would be in huge trouble. So in a sense, you also have a responsibility to them up to a point. So that was a situation that we were faced with, and that's how we covered North Korea. We go in there once a year if we were lucky, and otherwise we were doing it all from Seoul. So the bureau that we opened really gave us an opportunity to do something different. It's very difficult. It's still very early days, but that's what we decided to do. The way it's different is this. We can go in, essentially the agreement allows us to go in essentially once every 6 weeks, something like that, for a maximum period of about 10 days each time. So once a year, you're perhaps looking at 10 visits, something along those lines. We can provide them with story ideas at least a month in advance. We have to do that. We send our proposals saying this is what we would like to do. Communication is incredibly challenging. I should state at this point, actually, we have a bricks and mortar bureau there. It's in the state-run agency, the KCNA agency's main office, and we do have 2 reporters who are working for us. One's a video journalist, one is a photographer, and the video journalist is also the fixer. So he's the one who arranges the stuff that we do every time we go in. So we would send him an email saying, okay, these are our ideas, maybe 5 ideas of we'd like to go and see this thing. We'd like to go to a music academy to see people being trained to do music. We'd like to go to an animation studio where they're doing animation for foreign companies and stuff like this. And what would generally happen was we wouldn't get much of a reply from that. We can't call them. There's no direct line from South Korea, obviously, but in general anyway. So it's only by email. There's no other option for us to communicate with them. And we get sometimes a little bit of feedback, but then what would end up, we would arrive, and we would sit down on the first night and say, so, our proposals, and they go, no, no, ooh, maybe, no, don't think so, perhaps. And then you got 10 days to fill, you know. But what did happen was slowly, for them, I think there's a dynamic at work there where the North Koreans are obviously incredibly wary of what they think you're going to try and do. And they, again, there are these people with direct responsibility for you. And if you get something or you write something perhaps that they're not going to be happy with, these are the guys who are going to get in a bit of trouble. So you can understand why they're incredibly restrictive in what they say yes to and what they say no to. But we've done 3 or 4 visits now. So we opened in September formally, and I went 3 times to that. And we have a mission there now, which is just returning with our new Seoul bureau chief. And this last mission actually was very interesting. I went there to introduce him. They gave us a lot of the stuff we asked for. They gave us an interview with an economic official, which was very interesting because it came just after China's announcement that it was going to cut the coal imports from North Korea, a huge economic move for the rest of this year. So he talked to us a little bit about that. We managed to do several reports that we were interested in, and also, of course, the events in Kuala Lumpur were going on during this time, and we could try and do something about the fact that people in North Korea don't even seem to know what's going on in Kuala Lumpur. So that's part of it. And a lot of it is about negative reporting. It's sort of negative in the sense of saying what is not happening is also sometimes as interesting as what actually is. How do we file? When we go there, we're allowed to, they didn't used to allow smartphones in, but they do now. And so when we go there, we get these Koryo-Link SIM cards. They're only for foreigners, but they're remarkable. I mean, you can access the entire internet with them on your smartphone. You can access North Korean defector-run websites in South Korea, just sort of slating off the entire regime. I mean, there's nothing to stop you doing that. It's much easier than China. You know, you can access Twitter, you can access Google, you can access Facebook. There's no problem with that at all. But obviously only you can do that, no one else can. And interestingly, we can't call our minders on their mobiles because they are on a completely different network. So again, the communication can be a problem. So we can file through, for photos, for example, and for video, if we want to do an urgent video, we can file through these smartphones. We can use them as hotspots, go into access the AFP platform, and we can send stuff. We can also send stuff through our bureau. There have been questions about censorship. You know, are you aware that? Are you worried about that what we do is censored in any way. There is absolutely none. It's zero. The problem, the difficulty, is just in the restrictions in getting the information in the first place. When you've got what you want, or at least what you can get, sending it, there is no problem whatsoever. We've never had anybody stop anything we've tried to write, or take photos of, or video that we have done. We send it either from the Bureau or by ourselves through our smartphones, and never once has there been an issue with this at all. And I think it's interesting what the North Koreans do get upset about. At least in the text side of things, when we write background about the human rights violations or their record of human rights violations, the fact that they're really unable to feed their entire population, they have terrible malnutrition problems, we can write about that in the background of the story, and they do not mind at all. We get feedback, but we don't get feedback about that. They're not upset. What they get upset about is any sort of mockery, anything. They have a very sharp antenna for it. Anything that seems to suggest we are in any way taking the piss out of their leadership or anybody else. And it was interesting, I think, when Wingfield Hayes, the BBC guy, was kicked out in May last year for the Congress. Two of the main problems they had with him was, one, he called Kim Jong-un corpulent, which is a pretty euphemistic way to describe him. And he also mentioned that a customs official had barked at him. He used that word, obviously for talking to me abruptly, and they said, "So you're saying we sound like dogs?" And these were the things they got upset about, much more than the rest of the copy that was put in. And yes, well, precisely. So, and the only thing they got upset with me about was that I wrote a story about using currency in North Korea. As a foreigner, you do not see North Korean currency. You only use euros, dollars, or Chinese renminbi. You're not really given the North Korean currency, and even if you were, you can't use it. So I wrote a story about that, and I mentioned that makes getting change very difficult sometimes when you go to certain places. They've got a small amount of change, and they don't have euro coins. So sometimes they would give you something different, like give you some sweets, or in one case I was given a tea bag. It's a tiny amount, it's like 50 cents, euros. And I mentioned that in the story and sort of went, there was this, and it was in paragraph 16, and they were deeply upset by this, and they made a special thing in the French de facto consulate in Paris and complained to Philippe.
And the guy from the representative from DPRK came to my office. He said, "I have something to complain about." So I was, what the hell is that? What have they done? It was just for that, for the sweets, for the little thing.
The tea bag. The tea bag. So, but I find that very interesting. I think when we went there, we were very nervous about, right at the beginning, we think, should we write this or not? Should we do that? Should we go there? Should we go down this avenue? And in fact, as long as it's sort of sourced to stuff like the United Nations and that they're putting out resolutions, they're criticizing North Korea for this, that, and the other, they don't have a problem. I think they're used to it. But never mock. And also, the only time I was sat down and told off very strongly was because I had used the words North Korea instead of DPRK when I was just chatting with my minders, and they told me it was disrespectful. And I also mentioned Kim Jong-un without using the word leader or chairman before his name. And both things they said I absolutely must not do. So in terms of just very quickly at the end, so what sort of stories can we do? It is difficult, but you can report that. I mean, it can be done. And I think the way that we try and do it, or the way we're trying to do it at the moment, is to try and pick on something as an angle to talk about something else. So, for example, you'll see in Pyongyang when you go there, what's very noticeable is that all these high-rise buildings, they all have they're apartment buildings, residences. They have these small solar panels on their veranda, obviously to help power a washing machine, I suppose, or a TV. So we wanted to do a story about that, and if we get to speak to somebody who buys these or somebody who sells them or anything, we can write about the energy crisis in North Korea and use a lot of background about that. At the same time, there's a very famous art studio there. We went there a couple of months ago called Mansudae Art Studio. It produces these enormous, a lot of paintings and everything else, but these enormous monuments which are commissioned by African states sometimes. It's a big foreign currency earner for North Korea. So we were able to go there, we were able to speak to a few of the very top artists who work there, and we were able to do a story, therefore, about North Korea's desperation to earn foreign currency, how it needs to fund its nuclear program and everything else, and also the impact of sanctions, because we were quite lucky at the time we went there, the US had come out with unilateral sanctions that actually named this art studio and named people who ran it, and they were put on the sanctions list. And we went to a football academy at one point and saw these young people they brought in to sort of train and build up a future national team, and interviewed the rather sad, lonely Norwegian coach of the national football team, who seems to be having a miserable time there. But what was interesting about that was that you could talk about sport, you can talk about Kim Jong-un's desperation. He's very big on sport, and the obvious reason is that he wants the sporting field, I guess, is one of the few global stages where North Korea can appear and not be slated off for its human rights abuses and its nuclear program. So they're very keen to have some impact in an international sporting field. It's crucial to them. They put a lot of money into it. And also this academy had a sanctions aspect to it because FIFA had stopped funding North Korea because FIFA is based in Switzerland, and the Swiss authorities had signed up to some of the sanctions, which didn't allow them to send funding. So that's what I mean. You find certain things that you can look at. It's only an intro, really, to the story that you're going to write about, which is going to be a lot of background, but you do have that crucial element of the color from Pyongyang. You have images to go with it, and we think that's very valuable. And I think I'll probably stop there because that's enough. But if you have any questions about that, that's fine.
So if anybody would like to, I'd like to open the floor up to questions. Keith, I'll hand the microphone over to. So if you could maybe. No. Not enough. Yeah. Okay.
Recording purposes. Sorry. For the recording purposes. Yeah, when I was in Beijing for the Washington Post, the only time I got in trouble was not for anything we wrote in the bureau, but for what other people wrote. You know, an editorial that appeared, or some other reporter writing something about China. Do they do that with you? Do they track what else AFP is writing about North Korea and then call you in and say, hey?
Absolutely not. But not to my knowledge. It's never happened to us. No. But of course, we wouldn't have that. Perhaps we wouldn't have that same sort of problem. We don't have op-ed sections to the agency or anything like that. So no, I'm not aware how closely they read the wire outside of what we produce. But they've certainly never come to us to talk about it. And in fact, just to follow on from that, in our last visit there, we were quite interested to ask people about Donald Trump. We thought it'd be interesting to have North Koreans, talk about this on camera or something and say, what do you think of him? And it was a disaster. It just didn't work at all because, of course, they have no opinion of him whatsoever. They don't know who he is. There is no reporting of it. There is nothing that comes out about it. They just hate the US president no matter who he is. And which is interesting in its own way, I suppose. But yes, well, there you go. We can all join.
Can I follow up that? Do they come to you if the French government does or says something they don't like?
No, not at all.
Not at all?
No, not at all. Although I think there's something about them that thinks that because we got France in our name, that somehow we are connected in some way, but they certainly don't ask us about that, no.
But are you treated differently because you're French? I mean, compared to other...
Yeah, badly.
But in what ways?
I know so I can understand. No, we're not treated differently. Just to add that France has no diplomatic relation with DPRK. There are only two countries in Europe with no diplomatic relation with DPRK. One is France, and the other one is is it Estonia or Lithuania? I'm very sorry, should know. But anyway, we're only two. So no, there is no, and it's quite interesting that the three global or three international media who were able to open bureaus in Pyongyang are three countries with no diplomatic relation with DPRK, which is the US, Japan with Kyoto. Kyoto were the first, by the way, then AP, then AFP. Not talking about Xinhua and Itartas for different reasons they're there, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for each of you. On the fake news, I was wondering to which extent the real good media are benefiting. Actually, the real media are benefiting from these fake news, aren't they? And that's also a problem. Just as the traditional media have benefited from Trump, that we keep, anything wrong that he says, people sell more newspapers and get more audience. So I think there is a real problem there because Anyway, if
You mean
comment
bad
on
news
this.
is good news? I mean
Well-
basically, and when you say benefiting, you mean financially at the end of the day?
Yeah, newspapers, apparently the news has become more important because of the fake news in a way. It's creating, Trump and all this circus has created a kind of a double layer of news, which to some extent the real good media have benefited.
Well, could be. We'll see. Maybe too early to say. I don't know about Le Monde. How many copies you sell more because of Trump. I don't know the consequences. For us, definitely. I'm not talking about financial benefits because it's too early to say, and it's difficult to measure when you are a news wire. It's difficult to measure. What part of the news is. Oh, you want a beer? I'm sorry. Charles want a beer.
Talking about fake news, yeah, he needs a beer.
The good thing is in Pyongyang, the beer is good.
Excellent.
So,
No, but for example, the CNBC editor was quoted, was interviewed by Al Jazeera, I think, and he said that he's sorry to say that, but anytime they interview Trump, the audience will go up. And he hates to have Trump on TV, but he loves his audience to go up. So that's the thing.
For us as a news wire, it's very difficult. Again, it's very difficult to measure the impact you can have when you sell a subscription to a media. What part Trump will have in the price of your subscription? For us at least, it's very difficult to. What we know, coming back to North Korea, is that there is a tremendous appetite for news from DPRK, especially photo and video. And before we opened the bureau in Pyongyang, we were asked, every month by Japanese clients, Japanese media, Korean, and other in Asia, when do you open your office in Pyongyang? So in a sense, you could say that, in terms of sales, at the end of the day, we may benefit from that as well.
It's almost 8 o'clock, so we'll get time for one more question.
So the North Korea situation is an extreme form, I think, of the question of access, the idea where you get access to information, but under rather circumscribed conditions. And North Korea is an extreme form of this question. But the question of access, I think, is a question that kind of pervades a lot of journalism. There's debate in America right now about whether or not you want to preserve access to sources in the Trump administration or just freeze them out because they have their own agenda. I guess, in AFP's perspective, how do you treat this question of access? Is there a point where you think the conditions under which we're getting access are too stringent for AFP to go after it? Or do you always try and get that access and then work the conditions to suit your reporting needs?
I guess there's two things you're looking at there. There's a place like North Korea which is particular, and you think, is it worth it? Are you able to do journalism that merits an investment in doing that, and is it credible? Are you doing something that's credible journalism when you go there? And I think the answer to that is yes. And for some of the reasons I mentioned, I think before. I think that the China watching thing is an interesting illustration of that. The way it used to be done in Hong Kong and looking at mainland China. It's it's the only way to do it. And they were desperate to get in. I remember sort of seeing a documentary about the ways people would find to get into mainland China just to be there, just to have some sort of not real access, it's geographical access in one way. But when you are there. When you're in a city like Pyongyang, if you're not there for just 3 days with 150 other people, you start to get a sense of a city, of a place. And we're allowed to go outside the hotel by ourselves as long as we don't take all our gear with us. We can stand at the train station and watch people going to work in the daily commute. You can see a mother get upset with her whining child. This is part of life, and it's the stuff you don't see if you go with a massive circus. And you start to realize that what you're doing, what you're trying to report about, it's the same as anywhere else. The access is incredibly controlled, but these are people living normal lives, and there's stuff to do there. The other question about access, I suppose, is what you mean by perhaps, being denied access to the White House pool because you're writing the wrong things, or
These are opposite ends, perhaps.
right. I mean, yeah, that's a huge question. I think under the Blair premiership in England, for example, Campbell was accused endlessly of using some leverage to people saying, we're going to cut off your access. You write that, we're going to cut off your access. You're not going to get... I think that's just a perennial problem. I think you just preserve your integrity and refuse to buckle under that sort of pressure and write what you can. And if they cut off access, they cut it off. But in our feeling, I think we will try for access wherever we can. And that's why we go to North Korea, and that's why we'll also absolutely try for every sort of access we can get to people we either disagree with or people who try and cut it off from us. If that answers your question, I'm just sure.
That's perfect.
So Philippe and Giles, thanks very much. So we'll end the formal part of the event, but Giles and Philippe will be here. So thank you.